Welcome to the Push Forward podcast. I'm your host, Alex. Today, I have the pleasure of speaking to Katie Stoller. She is a PR strategist, an expert in the area of communication, and more importantly, the influencer marketing community. She was doing influencer marketing before it was called influencer marketing, which is now sometimes also called creator. But then if you talk to creators, they're like, no, there's a difference. And you talk to the brands and the agencies. So it seems like everybody's all over the place. Is it digital marketing? Is it affiliate? It's all over the place. I find, Katie, I don't know about you, but I talk about this with our listeners, that it's whatever you want it to be. You define it and then move forward with it, right? So welcome to the podcast.
Thank you so much for having me.
Absolutely. So let's go way back when you started, before, like you said, before they were calling influencer marketing. What year was that?
So it's like hard to even like say when it started because like it didn't exist. So I graduated college in 2008 and it was like basically like worse than it is now in terms of jobs. I mean, I know jobs right now are kind of crazy, but it was that era of, the recession.
Yes.
Weird things were happening. Like internships were really hard to get. It was just like a terrible time to graduate college. But I ended up moving to California and getting an internship at a boutique PR agency. I knew I wanted to go into something related to PR. And I really call that, which at the time had no clue what it was going to turn into, but I call that kind of the beginning of what now is known as influencer marketing, because I was working at a boutique fashion agency and our entire job was getting clothes on celebrities to then get photographed by paparazzi. Like, how old school is that?
Yeah.
It seems like a different world, but there was there was like Facebook kind of, and Twitter was, just becoming popular. That was it. So I really kind of got the old school PR vibe, but that really is what influencer marketing has become. I mean, it's influential people wearing a product, using a product, being photographed, and influencing people to then purchase that product. So I'm very glad kind of that I did all these things. At the time I had no idea where it was going to lead, but it was really the precursor, as I call it, to kind of like traditional influencer marketing that we know it today. So then I went on and had a long career, around 10 years at big PR agencies in Chicago. And I was pitching media, doing kind of like traditional public relations. And as I was growing my career in PR, the world was taken by storm by social media. This is when brands, we were working on global brands. One of my big brands was S.C. Johnson. And they were like, let's start an Instagram. It was all just happening so organically. And I really got to be at the forefront of it. I mean, it was a really, really cool time to work in advertising and PR because it was all happening. And just growing so fast.
That's great. Obviously you've been at it long enough to have seen the evolution of everything from smartphones to social media, digital, and all of that. It was interesting to me early days too, when there were a lot of naysayers who were I had tech guys that worked with me then in those days, '08. Oh, Facebook is not going to survive, but they're anti social media. I said, no, I get it. Maybe it will. I don't know. Cause people were thinking about MySpace. And I said, I have no idea. But one thing that kind of early on convinced me that, oh man, this thing is here to stay, is when you're going to any store, Kate, and we would see the logos and icons on packaging. And I'm like, wait a minute, they're using that real estate to put another company's name? That had never happened in marketing before.
That's such a good point. I remember the first time I was watching cable TV, before streaming, and I saw the little Twitter bird icon on a commercial for McDonald's or something. And I was like, what? I was like, how? It was just so weird. I'm like, why? But that was as it was starting. They're like, I guess someone on the marketing team was like, it might be a good idea to plug our social media channels on here. Brands, because these social media tools like Facebook, for instance, that really started this whole thing, started as ways for people to interact with people that they knew, or people at their school, or people at their work, or their mom, or their grandma, or whatever. It wasn't started as a branded thing. And I remember in the early days at the advertising agency, when, Facebook was free to join, it was free for brands to get on, it was free to post. I was like, where's the money? Like, I didn't have that business sense at that time. I mean, none of us, I think, really understood that eventually it was going to make so much money, because there was no money being exchanged. And then
Right.
obviously, as like paid ads became a thing, and now paid ads is basically 90% of social media these days, in terms of how the algorithm works. It's just crazy, because it was all just kind of like free posting, and I was like, how is McDonald's putting this in their commercial, and like, how is this going to like be lucrative at some point? It was very confusing in the beginning.
It was, and I think it's continues to evolve. Well, obviously, with AI exploding now, and all the different opportunities for content creators and influencers, not only to work with the brand, but also be able to build their own brand by leveraging AI to create so much great content. Which I wanted to touch on that with you. You created an ebook and a guide to really help influencers. And so do you help the influencers? And for those who are listening who are influencers, they struggle with that. I hear it all the time. I can do great for this brand. I could do like a show, drive the eyeballs there, whether it's with a newsletter or their social media channels. But then they say, I struggle to set up my own brand and how to do outreach as an affiliate. Maybe they have like a media kit, or many of them just use direct messaging, right? DMs to make these deals happen. So you're on the other side. So you've made the deals as a media buyer and whatnot. So what are some of the tips and big takeaways from your ebook and guide?
Yeah. So I wrote Influencer Insider Guide right after I left my last like real job. I went off on my own in February of 2023. And I had always been responsible at all the agencies I worked at, all the companies I worked at, to be in charge of this like playbook. Like, we'd call it like an influencer playbook or a guide. And I was writing it. And as I was writing it, I was like, I'm doing no research. I'm not using anyone else's. I'm literally just writing this from my brain, because I've been doing it since the inception of it. And so that was my impetus to write it. I was like, I got to get this out of my head, and I need something that like I own, because I'm sick of like writing this mind share for companies that are not needed. So it was really like half passion project, half kind of like potential business, but more so I just wanted to get it out of my head and on paper. And the guide is really more for marketers. It's from the perspective of someone that worked on the brand side, that's worked with hundreds of thousands of probably of influencers, done tens of thousands and thousands of dollars of deals. And it's just kind of like the 101. If you're a marketer working at a brand or a student of marketing, and you want to like kind of understand the mechanics of influencer marketing, that's who it's for. However, if you are an influencer and you've been booking deals and you've been sort of dabbling in doing sponsored posts, but you don't really understand the other side of it, it is great to kind of, it's a peek behind the curtain of like what goes into
Right.
planning, what goes into budgeting, what goes into casting from the brand side. So that's kind of the guide. And I actually just today released some free downloadables on my website. I've been saying I'm going to do this for like 6 months, and I finally got them live. But there's like little decks about like etiquette, like email etiquette, relationship building with brands. So if you want some freebies, definitely go on the website. They're free to download. And they're pretty short, just kind of like overviews of these kind of high level topics of working with brands. So that's what I'll say about the website. But in terms of influencers that are looking to either do more brand partnerships or to start, because some of them, might have a decent following, they just can't figure out how to like break into it. There's no easy answer. And I feel like I get asked this literally every single day. Someone will message me on LinkedIn or DM me and be like, hey, like, how do I, what's the best way to get like, a hold of someone that works at one of these big PR agencies or someone at McDonald's or whatever. And there's anyone that's selling you a software or has some like weird AI, like tool that emails or something, like none of that is how it works. It's all built on relationships. This industry was built on relationships. It's thriving because of relationships. Like it's just a relationship business. So the best advice I have is just to play the long game. This is not an industry where you can just like kind of like find someone, DM them and get lucky. I mean, that happens. It happens. Cold pitching happens. Like it does work occasionally. But the people that I work with, the influencers I work with, are usually worked with before. And I've built relationships with their talent managers, with their teams, or with them. And I just have had really good experiences working with them. So I want to work with them again. And that's really kind of the only secret sauce. Like there isn't another secret path to getting in with brands aside from just being a person that is good at building relationships with the people that make the decisions.
Yeah, I love that though, that you're, really speaking a different language to a lot of people who in the influencer world, right? Whatever level they are, especially at the beginning. And we had another guest here, Christy, who's been an influencer for, I don't know, 10 years. And she always talks like you, really, that like there's no secret in that sense. And I love it because not a lot of people are sharing that with the world. The behind the curtains, right? Like you're saying, it's relationship based. It takes time. You can't just like buy your way into it or buy fake followers and belong to certain pods or private networks that are going to give the world the impression that you have a lot of eyeballs, and then go to the brand and say, hey, look, because there's smart people on the other side too who can do their due diligence and say, no, you don't have that. And so I just think that too many influencers and creators are so quick to talk about monetization now, not like 5 years ago, but like now. If you listen to a lot of these people who are on YouTube and TikTok, it's like the first thing they talk about is monetization. And it's like, I get it. You got to monetize, right, Katie? But you also have to earn that respect from your followers and from the brands. You can't just like walk in and do it. And we know, I mean, listen, you've been in the space for over a decade, and it's very noisy online. And so to be able to capture people's attention is super, super hard. So talk to us about, your experience, all those years working with the brands and whatnot. What's like the most interesting product brand? You might not even need to name it, but just talk to us about something that kind of reminds you of one of your favorite projects you worked on.
Oh, one of my favorite projects, I talk about this one a lot, was when I was at Golan, which is a huge PR agency. And one of my clients was a candy brand. And I had just started, I had a 3-month-old baby. This is during the pandemic. I was like coming off maternity leave to a new company, middle of the pandemic, like crazy times. And I tuned into my first like Zoom meeting with my boss and like all the different teams. And they're like, so we're doing a program on MySpace. And this was in 2021. And I was
MySpace.
Like, I was like, I need to like, you got to say that again. I thought you said MySpace. Like you couldn't have said MySpace. And they're like, no, we said MySpace.
Yeah.
And I was like, so the creative had already been sold to the client. So I wasn't like coming in to like give my opinion. Like this had been sold. We were kicking off the program. And I was leading the influencer piece of it. But it was actually really, really, really a fun program. And it was on MySpace. And I can explain like what we did, but it won awards and won Ad Age Awards. It was a really successful program. But basically what they did is they wanted to, we were trying to like piggyback off the trend of nostalgia. It's still very much a trend, but a couple years ago, it was like every time you look at your For You page or look at Instagram, people would be doing like the double pop collars, and like the girls would be straightening their bangs and scrunching their hair. Like it was very like early 2000s vibes. And these like Gen Z 20-year-olds or, 19-year-olds were doing these like funny looks that like I did when I was in college or high school. And a lot of millennials, my age, older millennials, mid millennials, like love these trends because it really had that nostalgic feel. So we were jumping on that, and what better way to like be nostalgic than MySpace? So basically it was for Trolley was the brand, and they're like the little gummies, sour gummies. And they had a new line of like Martians. And the idea was that they got lost at MySpace. They thought they were like coming to social media down to earth, but they got like stuck in MySpace thinking that was like the newest platform. It was really funny. And then they did a whole like contest where you had to go into actual MySpace, like log in. Like people were like, I can't remember my password, but like actually logging in, forgetting their password, going back and logging in and finding the different Martians. So it was really like a PR kind of stunty thing.
Got it.
But I think it was like 15 creators that were in this nostalgic space on TikTok and Instagram. And the content was so funny. Like people found their old logins and found like old pictures and old posts that they had
so
written
interactive
when they were like in seventh grade. Like imagine the content. So it was really funny. So that was one of my favorite kind of like the PR agencies really kill it. I come from a PR agency background, so I know, there's influencer agencies, there's media buying, there's a lot of people that kind of have their hands in influencer marketing, but I'm kind of, I'm from the PR world, and I truly believe that the PR agencies that kind of do it right because they come from these really, really deep storytelling insights that evoke such emotion because we're PR brand people. And those are the programs that I just love working on.
Yeah, that sounds really interesting. The whole gamification, which just
Yes.
kind of that increases engagement, right? Because you have that interactive nature of you're going back and forth with the content, and it's just great for the funnel and the customer journey for sure. In terms of, like, again, we have a lot of listeners who are influencers, creators, and marketers too. So many of these are what I would label as solopreneur, who are just, I'd say, starting out in the last 2, 3, 4 years. And maybe they've made a few deals here, but from a PR professional's standpoint, what advice would you give to them in terms of how you position your business? Because you're doing it right now as a consultant. You've left, obviously, the agency world, and now you're doing your thing. But what advice would you give for these influencers? And because a lot of them don't have the background that you have, the expertise that you have, the relationships that you have, which I'm not saying it's going to make it easier for you to get out there. You still have to, earn and make sure that things fit right with the brand. But I feel like for people who are truly creators, they just have a certain talent, but they don't really understand the marketing side. And there's so much to understand there between mass media and digital media. What do you recommend that they do? Because they're more like what I liken to, you're a small business owner. I mean, yes, you create content. Maybe you have 100,000 followers. You have people you're monetizing, but I find so many of them are doing so many things, and there's a little bit of money coming in from here, a little bit there, a little bit here, and they're just like, oh my God, what do I do?
Oh God, I have so much to say on this. So I would approach any sort of like creator business as a business, as you said. I think that's number one. I think is people get one deal and they get paid 20 grand for one post, and they're like, I'm rich. And like, you can't think of it that way. It's like being like a hairstylist or like any position where like you are in charge of your money and there's nothing coming in unless you do the work. It's the same idea, or a waitress, whatever. I think you got to think of it that way. You really have to think of it as a business, and you also have to think of it in terms of longevity. Like, I'm all about the long game. If this is something you want to do, if you're, a financial influencer on TikTok and you're all over FinTok and you're getting views or whatever, are you going to write a book? Are you going to, pitch to be guests on financial podcasts? Are you going to, do PR for yourself? Like, I mean, I do all that for my own self because I have the PR background. So I'm very lucky in that sense. But I don't think enough creator entrepreneurs are thinking of themselves that way. I think they're like trying to get the next pop of viral video for the next pop of sponsored content. And as we've seen in 2023, like, sponsored content used to be king. Like, you could get, and I was paying people $60,000 for one Instagram. I paid someone $90,000 a couple months ago for one TikTok. So it is the most like lucrative, quick way to do it. But first of all, those deals come few and far between. Like, that's not normal. And if, for whatever reason you're growing, and you sort of go static, like, the money's going to go static. Like, you're not going to continue to go up in money unless your followers are continuing to go up and your engagement's continuing to go up. So really thinking about it long term and thinking of it as a holistic business. I know you talk a lot about affiliate marketing. Like, affiliate marketing can start at day one. Sign up for Rakuten and all the different, affiliate platforms. Get yourself out there. Like, when you are sharing links, try to only share links where you're going to benefit from them. Like, sign up for Like to Know It. Sign up for Howl. There's so many of these companies now that are benefiting the creator. And I've talked to so many creators that are like, I don't like using Like to Know It, or I don't like this. You have to link out. And like, some of the platforms aren't the best interface, and it is annoying to like make your, commenters comment the word or whatever. It is an extra step for your followers. But if you really want this to be a sustainable business, you have to like get paid for the links you're sharing. I mean, that's literally what an influencer is. They're influencing purchases. So affiliate marketing, sponsored content, PR for yourself and, you know, pushing your own brand as if it was any type of brand. Like you need to be doing your own PR. It's all really important. And then the other side of it, which back to, not to like keep plugging my website, but back to the freebies on my website, I talk a lot about like etiquette and how to get out there. One of my like things is like flirting with the brand. Like there's a lot of people that like get pitched so much gifting. And, you know, people hate gifting. Creators hate gifting. They're like, pay me for my work. And yes, I totally agree. Like big brands sending stuff out, expecting content or sending a brief with free product, not okay. But if you always drink, if your drink of choice is Diet Coke and you've always been a Diet Coke drinker, you drink it every day and you're posting it all the time, and they want to send you stuff and you're engaging with the brand manager that wants to send you stuff and you're tagging them, like chances are eventually you're going to get on their radar. So it's almost like gatekeeping the brands that you like just for the fact that they're not paying you isn't the best approach, but also giving too much away for free isn't the best approach. Like there's sort of a middle ground. So I talk about it as like a way to kind of like flirt with the brands that you want to work with, but there's a lot of pieces that go into it is the bottom line. I mean, I could talk about this forever in the specifics, but I think the biggest thing is just if you have a pop of virality or you know, you've always kind of had 20, 30,000 followers and one day you're up to 60,000, you're like, I'm going to do this. Like, don't flash in the panic. Like really try and think through what is my long-term strategy? What am I going to focus on the first year? What's my content going to look like as I evolve? Once I do my first brand partnership, am I going to follow up with that brand rep every quarter and see what they're working on? Like you got to have like these structures in place to create that longevity and really create a business. I mean, the people that are successful are not successful on accident. I will tell you that. Right. The really successful, I'm sure you know, the really successful creators are strategic minds and they are very business minded. They are not these like pie in the sky creators and they just create good content and they happen to get big deals. That's not how it works.
Wow. That was like, you're right. We could talk about that forever, but even just high level, the insights that you shared, I think are so valuable to the influencers who, you know, are on that, you know, maybe they're not earning enough to do it full time, but they're trying to figure out like, what do I do to do this full time? Because I am passionate about it. And I think that the tips and advice that you gave can only help them. So, you have the guide, you have the ebook. Tell us the website so that we can obviously get your brand out there as well, Katie.
Yeah, it's just influencerinsiderguide.com, one long word, obviously. And then I also have katiestoller.com. It's just like a site if you want to get in touch with me, but you can also just email me, hello@katiestoller. And I consult mostly for brands, but I also love working with creators. I've worked with a couple where they're at exactly the point that you just said, where they've like gotten a couple viral videos, they're, you know, growing on their follower count and they're just like, what's next? Like, what should I do? And I've gotten a couple people their first brand deals, which is like my favorite thing. Cause I'm like, you know, that's what I want. I want brands to connect with creators that make sense for the brands. And I want creators to work with brands that they truly love. Like that's when this industry is magic. So if I can be a bridge to those two groups, then my job is done.
Well, hopefully we make that connection here on the Push Forward podcast. Thank you so much for spending this time with us.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me.